Alex Crossley, welcome to the show. I have written you a bio, which you'll probably rip to pieces later and tell me how much better I could write it.
Should I bring this microphone closer?
No, that's probably fine. That's probably too far. Somewhere in between.
What do I do with my hands?
Come on, man. I'm trying to get through this bio, and then you can ask dumb questions. Alex Crossley is the senior pastor of Southern Life Church in Adelaide. With a strong focus on relationships, Alex has quickly become honoured, respected, and known by many other pastors in his region. With extensive reading and study, he's experienced in many social cultural topics. Quoted from your website here, it says, "In the midst of a broken culture, I believe that God has great things in store for his church. I'm stoked." He's stoked that he has placed us, being you and your wife Sarah, in the middle of Onapringa, ready to bring people out of darkness into his glorious light.
Well, that sounds really great.
Did ChatGPT write that?
It might have.
It might have helped.
It's just copy. It might not. None of it could be true. The whole thing.
Don't answer the question.
Probably untrue.
It's great to have you here. We've known each other for a long time, and I think there's probably been days. Other people normally that I have conversations with, I'll dig a bit into the past before we get to this question, but it's topical at least because there's been days I know if I asked you, Alex, are you hopeful? You'd be like, hell no. You'd kind of be answer no to that question. So, I mean, it's a sort of today question because it can also be sort of a tomorrow question. Are you hopeful today? About today? You feeling all right?
I'm hopeful today. I have had a coffee finally. My child woke up at 5 a.m.
Wonderful.
And the more hours that are between me and that event, the better. So I'm quite hopeful.
Wonderful. We can get to whether you're hopeful about tomorrow or not. But I guess what's your story been? You grew up here in Central Queensland with we grew up together. And there's been, I guess, a number of different things that happened in that process. You sort of taking up a call to ministry as well. So I don't need to talk. You can talk. What's your sort of few minutes on where you've come from and where you are now?
Yeah, so I grew up in Central Queensland, and Levi and I have been friends for a long time. Ended up getting offered a position as a pastor in Adelaide of a small church, and did that. That's been 6.5 years now that I've been doing that for, and it's good. It's not a super easy job, and you kind of have dreams of it being just wonderful success off the bat, and that's not the reality. The reality is a lot of hard work, and I don't know about, I think you said earlier that I was known and honoured by all the pastors around me, and that's a stretch, but there's a lot of, I've got some friends, and it's good. I really enjoy it. I think that it's what I've sort of always wanted to do, and it's nice to be able to do what you've always wanted to do, even if it's not always as easy as you hoped or as successful as you hoped. It's still nice to be doing the stuff that you think matches up with your skill set. And so I'm kind of honoured to be able to do that and honoured to be paid to do it. A lot of people, they have to volunteer to get some of that energy out. And for me, it's what I get to do every week. So that's a lot of fun. Did that answer that question?
Yeah,
I've lost the question. Usually when Levi and I talk, we're just rambling, and he gets me on some sort of ramble. So
you skipped over a fair bit of, grew up in Central Queensland, moved to Adelaide as pastor. There's a lot there.
Well, the Central Queensland stuff's unimportant.
Come on, man.
All my worst friends were here.
That journey, no one just wakes up one day and says, first of all, gets asked to become a pastor of a church, and they probably shouldn't, and then says yes to that thing. So you felt like you were called. There's a lot of years of.
From I think as a child, I felt like that's what I wanted to do. Underneath, you go through teenage years and you want to be a firefighter, or you want to be a film director for a season there, or you want to be an army general. So I had a couple of other ideas, but I did 6 months of graphic design at one point because you get a bit lost. But underneath it all, I have always cared a lot about ideas, and I've cared a lot about Christianity, the church, the Bible. So that was always under. The thing that gave me the most sense of purpose and satisfaction was anything to do with the church. So that was the call from, I felt like that was a call. I mean, that's a religious terminology, but that sense of that's what I'm meant to do from when I was about 8. And then, over the years you say, you pray about it. Lord, is that what you want me to do? If it is, can you make a way? And there's all that kind of stuff that goes on. And it was when I was 25 that the opportunity came. And that was after working in local government for a few years, working as for a private consultancy firm, doing like asset management, which is nothing to do with my skill set, really. It just came up and what I did, which I think is life. You tend to do the things that are in front of you. And for a scriptural point of view, it says in the Bible that you should do whatever your hands find to do. So for me, it's like, you might have aspirations to do something bigger, but for now, you've got this in front of you. You should do that with all your heart. You should work hard at it. You should do it the best you can. So I tried to do that. And when the opportunity came up to go actually into ministry, I was really thankful because for me, it felt like it was overdue. Of course, someone might say, well, why didn't you just go to Bible college and get yourself on that track? And I suppose that I thought about it. To be honest with you, I tried. It was one of those things where I started going to the process of looking into going to Bible college, and to use again Christian language, the doors kind of closed. It just didn't seem to come together. And I personally felt as if there was a lot to be learned outside of the church world about life and people. And I thought it was good to work. So, working regular jobs, even if you're someone who's really got a heart for Christianity, for the Bible, for theology, I think it's good to work in ordinary jobs with ordinary people because you learn a few things about how people actually think as opposed to how your textbook says they should think. So that's been good for me. I'm very grateful for that, even though I was frustrated because I really did want to just get on the train, do Bible college, go off, go to ministry, that kind of simple process. So someone else might be able to do that themselves, but for me, that just didn't work out. And in the end, I felt like God had called me to ministry, and God did. It was a kind of a miraculous thing. I didn't go looking for it. It came looking for me. And that has helped me as well because it gives you a sense of assurance that you're meant to be here. You're meant to be doing this because I didn't go looking for it. It came looking for me. So, I think you get to the end goal by various different routes. And the whole way along, my principle is whatever you're doing, assume it's what God wants you to do if it's in front of you. Not drugs, but anything else. But if it's a good thing, if it's a work, if it's an opportunity, then, hey, take it, do that thing, do your best at it. Trust that if it's not where you're meant to be ultimately, it's going to build towards that end result.
I think that's super important because people who know they want to be doing something different to what they're doing now, or feel called, use that wording, feel called to do something different, they can become very dissatisfied with the now, and so I think that pushing through that is important. I think that for the thing that impresses me about you as well is that call. You felt like that call came very early, and again, it's not this thing of like, okay, I feel like I want to do this, or I feel like God's called me to do this. Why isn't it happening now or tomorrow or next week? It's kind of like there's a huge amount of time that sometimes transpires between, like I've spoken to other people, even, had conversations with other people on this podcast about, the call coming, Sky takes up a new job, and like 2 months into that job, like the next thing that he's meant to be doing, he's like, he feels like God's telling him, like, that other thing, I want you to go do that. And he's like, I'm 2 months into this new big thing. And so he ended up doing that for a number of years before then moving into that other thing. But we get really impatient about the timeline on some of these things. And again, the thing that impresses me about you is you spent a lot of time probably doing what you wanted to do, but it actually lined up really well with what you're actually called to do in terms of you read a lot of books and you did a lot of listening to people and do you want to talk a little bit about that in terms of your preparation for ministry and how things that you thought might have been, maybe they were hard decisions, maybe they were easy, but they actually have really benefited you in the years later, those things kind of transpiring into what they have?
Yeah, well, nothing conscious. It wasn't, in retrospect, you say, oh, that was helpful, but I think it's hard to judge. It's very difficult to weigh what decisions will be helpful for you when you're making them. I mean, some things are easy: save money, get an education, do something with your mind that's profitable. That's kind of easy. But other things you don't really know. You just think, well, I should do this. And for me, reading, for example, I'm curious. I like reading, and I've always enjoyed it. And I tend to like reading difficult, or I don't know if they're difficult, but other people tell me they're difficult books. I don't know. I just enjoy doing that.
They're old. They were written a long time ago. They're old books.
Some old, some new, but in the end, if I have a question in my mind about something, what I like to do is go and read about it, which I recommend people do. I think that's what you ought to do. And if possible, you try and go deeper on it rather than just say Wikipedia. I did actually read a lot of Wikipedia when I was younger. I worked in one job and, to be honest, was bored. So would have Wikipedia open in a separate window and in between stuff just read as many articles as I could. Don't do that. But
that's why you're good at trivia.
That's why I'm good at trivia. Correct.
Okay,
It helped with trivia a lot, but or it helped with trivia that's probably false because Wikipedia is not that reliable. But I think you can. A lot of people are curious today, and we have a lot of ways to satisfy that curiosity. You've got the internet means that a lot of information is at people's fingertips. I guess my principle that I try and carry into life is there's a lazy way of learning information. Google it, get an answer. And that's fine for certain things. But if you want to know about a topic, you're going to have to do a little bit more work than that. And so my approach has been find, say, a good book on the topic and then read the books that person read in writing that book. I think the first time I did this was when I was a teenager and I realized I wanted more humility. And I guess you could pray for humility and see if God makes your life miserable. I was wanting to read about it because I wanted to sort of understand humility. So I found a few books about humility, maybe 6 or 7. Just you read a book and then they say, oh, this book was really good. And so you get that book and read it. I don't know that it made me humble, but it made me realize that you can learn more deeply about a subject by doing that work as opposed to just Googling it or listening or just thinking top of your head. That's what it means. And of course, going to university is kind of like that. That's what they do with a subject. They'll make you do the background, read the papers, all that kind of stuff. But I get interested in different things. So I get interested, right now I'm reading a lot about I don't know how to say it, but I'm reading about sex, but not necessarily like the actual act of sex, but reading culturally about what is happening with sex in culture. I just get interested, and so you pick up a book and you read a book, and then that book references a book, and I go on these rabbit trails, and that comes in handy. That helps you have things to say. Although I will say it also can be a distraction, and you can end up spending a lot of time learning and not doing. So yeah, it's a strengths and weaknesses thing, but I do think people should do that. I think that if you have an interest in a topic, don't just take the easy route. Learn about it. Actually go and do some difficult reading or listening or audiobook or do something to develop a proper thought about the topic. Because I think a lot of things that people face, the way I sort of describe it is that if you can learn deeply enough about a topic, or if you can read people who actually have thought about it, because the truth is, you're just reading or you're listening to people who have done the thinking. So you're still not doing your own thinking. But over time, you're building enough resources mentally to kind of think around the topic. What I mean by that is that you're faced with something, and rather than just thinking the first thing that comes to your head, you can sort of start to look at it from several different angles and try and go, rather than just what's the simplest answer that makes me think, that must be the right answer. You can sort of start to say, well, what are the other perspectives on this? And the only way to ever have other perspectives on stuff is by doing some proper thinking about it, proper reading about it. And yeah, that's sort of in a long-winded way. That's kind of what I try to do. Don't know how much is helpful in ministry, because sometimes in ministry you just got to top up with the simple stuff. But that's a personal thing. I think I was just born like that. That's just a personal habit of curiosity. So
yeah, I think you touched on it there, not just reading, but thinking. I think that's something that I don't do enough of. I think that's not just, it's easy to read and then embrace or consume content, media, podcasts, whatever, and then embrace the ideas of those things. Now, if you're reading or listening to a variation of opinions, then you can kind of come to a bit of consensus in yourself. But I think that thinking is super important. We talked about something recently where I asked you a question, and then you came out with this really great answer. Like, I hadn't thought that much about the thing that I asked you a question about, but you had, and you'd thought about it. It was just a life experience thing. And you're like, I've been thinking about that, and this is why I think this was this way. And I was like, yeah. It was really a bit of a revelation to me, because I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about that thing you had. And I think that more than just consuming things, actually thinking and talking is a powerful way of, refining those ideas.
Yeah, which is what reading is. A conversation with the person who wrote the book. You don't, like you said, our tendency is to take the first opinion we hear and to take that as gospel. That's true. And it's not to become a cynic who doesn't take opinions. The problem is in your industry, you're in film, I remember your early work, and your early work looked a lot like everybody else's early work when they first start doing photography.
Or the work of the people that I was consuming content from.
Yeah, correct.
Or whatever.
You had very little range. The truth is you had limited range. Most of your stuff looked the same. Like I remember you making videos and they all were just like slow motion shots with the same kind of
pull focus.
Pull focus, edit spacing. And that's fine. The question is, how do you get from there to being somebody with a lot more range in your field? Well, practice is one thing, but it's not just practice, because you could just practice the same shot and then you'll get really good at that shot. It's practice combined with exposure to other ideas. And it's like building your repertoire of possible ways you could think about solving a problem. So in music, in the beginning, if you're presented with a piece of music, you can only play what you know. You only play the chords that you actually know. You can't do other things. You don't know them. So you have to do a lot of work to learn, to build muscle memory, to get that stuff together so that when faced with a new idea of music, you can now start to combine all those different things to produce a beautiful melody. For you, it's been years of thinking about film and photography and videography that's given you a larger repertoire of shots. And so you don't look like a student photographer anymore. You look like a professional. But my thing is that every area of life's the same. Like some people think because they have access to the internet or they have access to a book or they have access to a podcast that they can now say intelligent things about a subject. But if you only know one thing about that subject, you're only going to be able to say one thing about that subject. And you're not just, I don't think anybody, maybe there's some people out there, and I don't consider myself one of these people at all. Maybe there's some people out there and they just happen to have lots of different unique and clever, intelligent thoughts on lots of different topics. But that's not mostly the case. Mostly the case is that people, the more they learn about any given area, the more they have ideas about it and they can start to be creative because they kind of have the musical notes put together. And I think what I noticed with people, I said to one guy once, you're too smart to be so dumb as to not read books. Because he was an intelligent guy and he knew stuff, like he could think, but all his answers to every question were just the same old recycled garbage that floats to the top of Instagram. Like he never had anything deeper to say because he didn't know anything anymore about any topic. All he was doing was taking the path of least resistance, which is, I have a problem, what's the first solution? That must be the right solution. And that's fine. Like you don't have to make that, you don't need to be making unique decisions on every area of life. You shouldn't be. But for me, it's like you do want to be somebody who, particularly on the difficult stuff about life, you kind of want to be saying like, well, I need to know a bit more about this stuff so I can have an opinion. And I don't want to just be saying the first thing that I think is true, because it's probably just what they call a truism, meaning that it's like it sort of sounds true and it's not wrong, but it's not a very intelligent take on the idea. And it certainly isn't one that's going to help you deal with complex solutions. So I try as much as I can, if I've got an area that I'm a bit unsure about or I want to learn more about, it's not to become somebody who's an expert on everything, because you can't do that. It's not possible. And obviously, as a Christian or as a pastor, I think I just...
You drop that back down again.
That's what I'm like, eh?
Touching stuff.
How's that go back down?
Just press the arrow and hold it down until it gets to a good level. Yeah, there.
I request that you keep that in the podcast. Where was I?
As a Christian, something about...
As a Christian, everything isn't about knowing stuff or being smart. Like, that's not the point. Obviously, the point is loving people. The point is caring for people, loving God. But as somebody who's trying to navigate through life, I have found that if you have a limited... this is the old saying, if the man only has a hammer, everything's a nail. And whenever you meet somebody who says stuff intelligently about a topic that you actually you're helped by, it's because they don't just have a hammer. It's because they've got a proper tool bag and they can recognize that your problem isn't just a hammer problem. Your problem might require some other thinking. But the problem is you have to build that toolkit of ideas. You kind of got to do the work. And the unfortunate reality of that for a lot of smart, intelligent, I think particularly young men that I meet, including myself on lots of areas, is that it requires time, patience, and humility, because you kind of have to say, well, I actually don't know what I'm talking about here. I've got a solution, but to be honest, it's probably not the best one. It's probably the one that I just picked up. I saw some quote on Facebook and I thought, yeah, that must be the truth. And it might be the truth. Maybe it's true. I don't know. Maybe it is true. But the truth is that sometimes you need to do a little bit more work. And the more complex a topic is, the more I think you need to be somebody who's willing to, think about it. But to try and stress my earlier point, I kind of got lost. To try and stress my earlier point, when we say think about something, I don't think it means sitting in a field and dreaming about it. I don't think that alone is thinking. I think in order to think properly, you have to have added into your toolkit, wisdom that you can begin to put together. Like the way you think and dream about film isn't just by sitting in an empty space with no prior experience. What you do when you're thinking about film is you're combining all your prior experience and the information that you know is out there that you've been exposed to, other filmmakers, other people who do things. And then you're allowing all that stuff to come together and to be sorted to fit a solution to the problem that you're facing. And I think that requires time. It requires effort. You can't just do it. But most of us, what we want to do is we want to kind of sit somewhere and just have it. Just have the genius idea, have the great solution. And this is why you have a lot of podcasts, probably including this one, where it's, two guys like myself just giving the same answer that you can find on 150 other podcasts to every question, because we haven't done the work. And because we haven't done the work, we don't have an original answer. Not to discourage the podcast, but just to admit my reality that probably everything you're even hearing me say is just the same old thing you're going to hear anyone else saying, because we still haven't done the work to find that new answer to the problem.
I think in the process of that, not just thinking, but critical thinking as well, I really like the idea of taking something you believe and either letting it be challenged, through a conversation with someone else, or challenging it yourself. And then what'll happen is you'll either change your opinion, which is maybe you should about that thing. You might be wrong, probably wrong about a lot of stuff. Or you actually you reinforce the idea with then true information, which makes the things you believe more robust and strong, which I think is also a good thing. So the outcome of listening to people who have a different opinion to you, talking to people who have a different opinion to you, I feel like it's only a win, because it actually will help refine the things you think about. Reading books of, different people and from different time periods and all those things. I think it only builds a more robust way of thinking in the way that you view the world.
Yeah.
That's how I approach that anyway. So that's something that people tend to run away from, I feel like,
We want easy solutions. We want to be able to, and that makes sense because you only have so much time in a day. The problem is, I think in our information age, everybody wants to be a voice of wisdom. And again, I put myself in this category. To make sure that nobody thinks I'm wise. The truth is I don't know that much stuff, but we all want to be the person who is a voice of intelligence and wisdom, but very, very few people actually want to put the effort in or the time. To go back to an earlier comment you made, things take time.
Yeah.
It takes, I think, to be really able to have genuinely insightful ideas, you're probably talking about decades worth of experience before you have that view. And that's probably only on the one topic that you actually experienced. There's no reason, this is why celebrities get in trouble, because actors and actresses, they spend decades honing the craft of acting, and then someone asks them a political question when they're 55 and they think that they ought to have something to say about it, but they have nothing interesting to say, because of course they don't. They didn't put any work into that. There's zero development. All that's happened is that they have a spotlight. But I think in our day, all of us are mini celebrities a little bit, because we all have the ability through the internet to sort of vocalize our opinion. And my thing is, well, do you have an opinion that's actually formed on that topic, or do you just have what everybody else is saying? And my aim in life, apart from serving God, honoring him, loving my family, all that kind of stuff, which is more important, is that if someone asks me a question about a topic, I'd really like to have something interesting to say about it, as opposed to just the same old recycled garbage that everybody else is saying. That's my aim. Personal thing is to not just be the same old boring voice as everybody else. And I probably have failed at that so far, but that's the aim. Because I think it's good stewardship of your mental capacity is to put some work in. And I think it's humility too, to go to a Christian point of view. Humility is recognizing that you're not special just because of you're special, but you're not an expert just because you exist. Humility is saying, hey, there's some people out there, they have really thought about this, and I would like to learn from them before I start to grace everybody with my wonderful wisdom. And of course, I'm not saying this to say nobody should say anything, but the Bible says, be slow to speak, be quick to listen. I fail at both of those. I'm really quick to speak and I'm very slow to listen. But it's touching on a concept of wisdom, is that the person who listens is learning, they're building into their mind some actual ideas. And then when they speak, what's going to come out is not just going to be, the same old Instagram post that puts over a nice little image of someone running towards a sunset, which so much of what I hear people say, including a lot of young pastors, so much of what they say, it just fits into that category. I'm like, man, you just got that off Instagram. Like, you did not think about that. That is the first thought you had about that topic. And I can tell, because it's not very original. Maybe it's helpful, maybe it's true, but it's not original. And you kind of want to be a little original, I think. I think anyway. Maybe I'm just proud.
No, I mean, it's not a bad thing to have your own ideas about things. Like I said, the problem is if you haven't thought them through and they're weak in terms of the conviction that you have to live them out or to actually uphold them, when someone questions it, you'll just flip or break because it's not a robust idea.
You'll change your opinion, which a lot of people do.
Yeah.
They read one book, they got that opinion. They read the next book, they got the next opinion. Or they don't read a book, really. They watch one guy's YouTube clip and then they take that opinion and then they switch, because they haven't really built out an actual robust understanding of the topic to be able to say, oh, that guy's, for example, once you learn a topic well enough, you can recognize where someone's coming from, and you can say, oh, I know where you're coming from, so I can recognize what you're really saying. And that enables me to sort of discern how true it really is versus being like, oh yeah, it must be true because you said it in the right suit.
Or this person said it, so it must be true.
Must be true, yeah.
So that's where I feel like I'd rather, you said unique, but I feel like we want to have strong and robust ideas, not just like unique.
Yeah.
In that there should be a good consensus of people who maybe hold them.
Yeah.
So you're hopeful today, great. What about tomorrow? Again, it might be a no, which is okay, and I want to know why. Declining birth rate, or it's it's something like that.
We live in a messed up time of culture. There's a couple of reasons to be hopeful. The first one is that human history has never been particularly neat, and it's always been messed up. And as a Christian, it's kind of encouraging because the Bible really explicitly says there will never be a time until the Lord returns that things are going to be all good. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be wars. There's always going to be evil in people's hearts. And a lot of our problems we see today is because of evil in people's hearts. And that may sound like a bad reason to be hopeful, but it's a good reason to be hopeful because it's the Bible that I believe is true tells us that. And so then I'm like, cool. The Bible also tells the solution to that problem. So if the Bible said it's a problem, if the Bible correctly diagnosed the problem and then says, here's the solution, then I've got some hope because it said there's a solution to that problem. The thing that would be unhopeful is if the problem didn't exist, because that means the solution doesn't matter. As it turns out, the Bible says evil, the poor will always be with you. Evil will always be present. The thoughts of every man's heart is wicked. And you're seeing that today in our culture. And whatever position you take politically, you probably feel that way in a way that you didn't maybe even 3 years ago. You feel that people across from you on whatever political issue are not operating with wisdom, and they're not operating with rationality, and they're probably operating out of like a wickedness, like an evil that's trying to destroy the world. And to me, that's exactly the description of humanity that the Bible gives. And it says it's never going to change until the Lord returns and remakes stuff. So helpful noise out there. So that gives me hope because, it's like, I think it's the kind of hope that someone has if a doctor says, I've correctly diagnosed your disease and here's the cure. No matter how painful the cure might be, the fear is that the doctor has incorrectly diagnosed your disease and that the cure won't really fix it. But if he says, this is the disease, this is the cure is painful, the cure is slow, but nonetheless, it is the cure for the disease. And you learn that disease, that really is what he's said really is true about the disease, then it gives you hope for the cure. to repeat myself, to make that point clear. So that's a broad hope.
So you were saying about
why I'm hopeful
Yeah.
moving forward.
The
second reason is that you don't know what's about to happen. Like, you never know what's around the corner. And that's obviously can be a fearful thing as well. But and this story will make it sound like that's the case. But 2020, I don't know how many pastors got up and said, this is 2020, year of 2020 vision and all that kind of stuff. And then what happens, like this pandemic hits and suddenly everything's shut down for 2 years. And again, that might sound really negative, but the truth is positive stuff also fits into that category. I don't know how many people have thought they were never going to meet somebody, and then the next week they met the love of their life. We don't know how many people who thought they could never have children, and then the next week they were pregnant. And job opportunities, and you can never ever predict what's going to really happen a year from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, which means you really have a choice. Either you can live with a perpetual state of like fear, it could all go wrong, which I have a little bit of a tendency to do, to be honest. Like, by temperament, I can fall into that category. And one of the downsides of doing reading is that you do learn all the terrible things that could happen, and you think, oh, this could get a lot worse. But at the same time, you can choose that. But I think from a Christian point of view, and with the knowledge of a good God and knowledge that he's in control, and my own testimonies throughout my life of the times when he's been good to me, even my wife, the year that I met her, I sort of, in response to some encouragement from friends, it might have been you included, I said, okay, I'm going to actually try and put some effort into meeting a wife, a girlfriend, whatever. Because I've always been a bit lazy about that. You know this, like, it's always been a thing, yeah, whatever. And, that year went by and I was praying, Lord, let me meet a wife. I'd love to meet a wife, all that kind of stuff. But 9 months went, well, not 9 months, it was like 10 months went by, and I had one unsuccessful attempt that just didn't work. And I was disappointed about that. And I really just thought at the end of 10 months, I thought, there's no chance I'm going to meet anybody. Like, I don't know girls. And I've tried with the people I know, I've tried to reach out, or I've tried online dating. That's a disaster. Christian online dating is the worst. So I've tried, and I'm like, there's no options here. And I remember praying. One of my prayers was that I would meet my wife before the end of that year. Just one of those little prayers. And the funny thing was that I met Sarah, it was like November 31st or something. Like, I didn't, when I met her, I didn't think, oh, this is my wife. But I did actually meet her before the end of that year. And it was just completely out of the blue. It was not expected. I didn't expect it. I actually thought all of my logic and wisdom and intelligence told me that it was very unrealistic in my environment that I was in, that was not going to happen. So I think you got to be a little hopeful. You got to either be completely despair because everything could be terrible, or you can be hopeful because you don't know what's going to happen next. And again, I think for someone who follows the Lord, walks with him, my experience is that he does actually bring good things as well as brings you through bad things. So that gives me a lot of hope. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a very good answer.
There you go.
And then I guess, what do people do? I mean, like, what should you, advice to young people
who are not hopeful?
Who aren't hopeful, yeah, or they're concerned for the future. There's a lot of, and again, like I said, I'm not even that well read, but when people talk about, how terrible the world is and XXX, even I can say through some basic, reading, well, we actually live in pretty good times because infant mortality is down and, lifespan is increasing. And, well, there's even basic information that I can sort of convey. Like, what's your take on that when people are, in despair or not hopeful about the world?
So I think I do two things, one of which may not be helpful. But first of all, I actually don't think that it's the worst thing in the world to acknowledge when things are not good. I think that there's a false kind of hope, which is pretending everything's okay. I think it ends up building a despair and frustration because things aren't okay. I think if things are not good, a great first step is acknowledging things aren't good. It's like, I think if you're faced with, some sort of problem, look the problem in the face and say, that's the problem. I know what the problem is now. This helps on two levels. First of all, when you're feeling a little hopeless, what you tend to do is you tend to start to say everything's bad. But when you look at the problem, you go, no, that's bad. It might be family problems. It could be something in your own personal life. Like, even people who say I'm depressed or I'm feeling anxious. It's like, okay, you know what? What about? Really, try to be specific. Try to tell me what the problem really is. And it could be terrible. Like, it could be like, I'm anxious about the whole world. Well, to quote someone like Jordan Peterson, he'll say, well, you can't control the whole world, but you can deal with your own mess. Well, my version of that is that I want to know what I'm worried about. And for a Christian, that means that once you identify the worry, you can do two things. The first one of which is that you can hand it over to God. So you can say, look, I can't deal with this problem, but you can. So I can choose to take that problem and I can then essentially give it away. Look, I can't handle this anymore. It's too big for me. It's not too big for you though. I'm going to give it to you. And maybe a second part is that sometimes you can fix it. Like, sometimes people can fix the problem that they're facing, the thing that's making them feel hopeless. Sometimes it's actually fixable. But while they're in that state of like just ignorance of like, I don't know what it is. I'm just feeling bad all the time. Then they can't do anything about it. And it will tend to creep. Like, darkness tends to have that kind of creeping effect like you see in the movies. It starts in one area, and maybe it's loneliness. Maybe you're lonely because you're lonely, alone. And what happens is you start to globalize that so it spreads out into every area of your life. And I have this funny little thing that happens with me because I go for a walk with my wife and my dog. We go into a loop. It's maybe 3 kilometers. And some days, quite a lot of days actually, by temperament, I'll start out and I'll be just complaining about stuff. And we'll walk, 3/4 of the loop, and I'm just getting more and more miserable as we walk. Oh, everything's terrible. This problem's so bad. And just complaining. And what happens is that there may be actually a thing happen that was unpleasant or bad, but it spreads. As I complain, as I think about it, it spreads to everything. It's that whole thing. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I think I'll go eat worms. And then I get to like 3/4, and usually my wife, she's quite patient, but she'll eventually say, is there anything you're thankful for? And so then I was like, I guess there's one thing. And it's amazing when you start being thankful for that one. Like, so you put aside the thing that you're not worried about, and you think of the thing that you're thankful for. Suddenly the light starts to spread. And the same way the darkness spread and everything became terrible, in the other way you start to go, actually, I'm thankful for quite a lot of things here. And maybe for some people that's harder than others, because maybe for some people there are less things that they think they're thankful for. However, it's a pretty hard and fast rule that the thing that you look at will tend to grow in your vision. Whatever you focus on is going to get bigger and bigger. So if you, so my 2-step process is, first of all, acknowledge actually what the problem is. Isolate it in a sense. And maybe it's a mountain you're like, that's a huge mountain. So I'm not saying it might literally be not a molehill. It might be a mountain. But so recognize the problem, because then you can hand it over to the Lord in prayer, or you can get help about it, or you can fix it yourself, like whatever, maybe all three. And then the second one is start to actually take some gratitude and thankfulness in the stuff that isn't the bad stuff. Because there is always good things happening. Like, there's always something happening that you can be hopeful for and thankful about. And the funny thing is that those 2 steps, which to me, they might sound clever to you, but that's basically exactly what the Bible, which is like a 5,000-year-old book, says. Rejoice in all circumstances. Cast your cares upon the Lord because he cares for you. The Bible never says there's not bad stuff happening. In fact, the Bible's like really clear. Terrible stuff's happening all the time. And if you really read the Bible properly, it's like worse stuff than you thought's happening is happening. It's probably happening next door, and it might happen to you. The Bible's not a positive book in that sense. The Bible is a book about life. And it's like, things suck, and they suck for some people real bad. But it's like, but God is bigger than those situations. He can actually help you. And on top of that, it's like, rejoice, be thankful. Find those things that you can be thankful for. And I know it sounds real simple, real trite, but too few people do it. And as someone who's like a little bit anxious by nature, a little bit of I tend to overthink things and worry about stuff. I find the number of times that I'm embarrassed because of how much better I feel just by being thankful for one thing, and how much that light of thankfulness drives out the darkness of worry, that it's quite embarrassing really, because often I will be super pessimistic about all sorts of stuff, and I'll give one little thankfulness about something stupid, and instantly I feel better. And then I sort of pretend that I don't feel better. The next 5 minutes of the walk, I'm like, I still feel terrible. But I actually start to feel better. I start to feel more hopeful, like, yeah, things are good. Because that's the truth. There's always 2 things going on. There's going to be dark, there's going to be light. Whatever you're thinking about is what you're going to see.
It's a good encouragement.
I hope so. It encourages me.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Well, I appreciate your insight into those particular those things. I think, hopefully, I mean, I know you've been a real blessing to me in my life. Listening to some of the things you've got to say, growing together as well. Being an encouragement to one another. Always encouraging me to read more. I think I've read more books in the last year than I have my whole entire life previous. So I'm trying to do that.
Too smart to be that stupid, man.
I'm too smart to be okay. I appreciate that. It's a compliment, I think. But no, thanks for coming in. Thanks for your time. We'll catch up again, and it'll be interesting to see, what sort of happens in the world as time goes on and things happen, and we both grow old and have more kids and do all that stuff. It's a fun time.
Absolutely. No, cheers.
Bless you. Thanks.